Welcome to WagerTalk, everybody. Sweet 16 edition. Scott Spreitzer here with Marco D'Angelo, Dave Cokin, Mark Seidel at the controls, and we're going to talk about all the games on Thursday. And in another podcast, we'll talk about all the games on Friday. Give you a few picks and also best bets from each day. But guys, I got to tell you, man, Kansas State, Kentucky tipping things off on Thursday. Interesting matchup, obviously, because Kansas State gets here thanks to a very bad outing by the Creighton Blue Jays. Maybe Marcus Foster's worst game he's ever played since transferring to Creighton. It looked like he was trying to do too much against his ex-mates. And then, of course, drawing the team that upset the number one, the 16 over the 1, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And had to be tough for them to get up. They did cover the spread, but had to be tough for them to get up for K-State following that big, stunning win. So here they are. Last week at this time, Wednesday night, going into Thursday, John Calipari's bitching, moaning, whining, complaining about a number 5 seed. I think he's pretty happy with where he sits right now. They just got to get the job done now. And, guys, Kentucky, as we speak, laying about 5.5. Total is 138.5. And, Dave, I'll start with you. But according to Jason Simbal on our radio show on Thursday, he said the sharp action is actually on Kansas State in this one.
Yeah, I don't know how heavy that is. But, I guess that you can look at this in a variety of ways. One, Bruce Weber is a dangerous underdog coach. When big things are expected from Kansas State, they generally, that might be overstating it, but they're not the most reliable favorite of all time. Let's put it that way. And sure enough, on Sunday, they're facing UMBC, or was it Saturday, actually, facing UMBC, which I didn't play the game, and part of the reason I didn't play it was because of Weber and his tendencies as when they're expected to do something well. This was an incredible bounce situation for the Retrievers. They were off the biggest upset in terms of importance, the biggest upset in NCAA tournament history. And this is a team that, if you go back to its conference tournament, and it's not a very good conference, they were down double figures at the half against UMass Lowell in their very first conference tournament game. I remember that because I had UMass Lowell plus the points and wasn't very happy about the second half of that game.
That was an ugly second half.
Ooh,
holy cow.
That was nasty.
What a changing game.
But, this was a spot where a really good team, to me, handles UMBC and just dispatches them with relative ease. Well, there was nothing relatively easy about the Kansas State win in round 2. They had their hands full with this team. I just don't think that Kansas State can handle Kentucky, which is peaking at the right time. Listen, I know Calipari's got his detractors for a variety of reasons. This guy knows how to coach basketball games. I think his team's going to be ready to play. They're playing their best ball of the season. Their point guard play has improved dramatically late in the season. Outside of that one game against Florida at the end of the regular season in the SEC, this team's on a pretty good roll right now. I think eventually the size and the athleticism at Kentucky is going to do Kansas State in.
You know what I like, Marco? Our good friend Mark Dufty, who, of course, is the sportsbook director at Jerry's Nugget. It's a standalone. It's a sharp shop. Right. What I like, let's say, for instance, we'll use this number. Kentucky's 5.5 everywhere, basically, as we speak, except one spot. There's 6 at Jerry's Nugget. And, I've never gone back to track and see, okay, if they're the one book that stands out from the rest, how well would you do backing that team at a half a point lower or whatever at the other books, favoring what Jerry's Nugget has put out? But it sure feels good if you like that team that has that extra half a point above everybody else at Jerry's Nugget, doesn't it? Mark Dufty does a fantastic job there. It is a sharp shop. They've had this line, though, as high as 7, right now sitting at 6.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit surprised when you said that Jason said that the early action, Sharps was on Kansas State, because usually when we've got a game of this magnitude and you've got a marquee team in Kentucky, which they're every year, that's a public team, that the Sharps would come in and grab Kansas State early. Because, let's face it, the public hasn't started betting these games yet. The average Joe bets later, game day. And you got to expect that the average Joe is going to look at this game and take Kentucky. So I'm surprised that the Sharps didn't wait to see that line kind of, inflate up there and get the best of it for them. And I do expect the public on Kentucky because they are going to look at that Sunday game with Kansas State. And, the reason I didn't get involved in that one is I thought Vegas made the line a little bit too high for Kansas State. I think they're starting to understand that people do bet situational stuff. And I can tell you that night, Friday night, when Virginia got upset, my Twitter account, people were DMing me and replying to me and are going, this is going to be one of Marco's fat and sassy of the decade games and everything, because everybody expected the flat spot, from them after winning the game against Virginia. But what I didn't like about Kansas State is they had UMBC in a spot where they only scored 2 points over a 10-minute period.
It seemed like it was 34-33 forever every time I checked my app.
And they only extended their lead by a point during that stretch. They couldn't put that inferior team away, and that's a concern. I think the only shot that Kansas State has in this game is they need to slow this game down. They got to get Kentucky in a half-court game. And with that said, we talk about in football a lot correlated parlays. If you like Kentucky, I think you're going to be on the overside. Mm-hmm. If you lean to Kansas State, you're going to be on the underside. And I'm leaning towards the total because I think this total is a little bit higher because of Kentucky. I'm looking to the under in this one because it's the only shot that Kansas State has. And what I saw, that ugly stretch of basketball in the Sunday game with Kansas State, I don't know that they score enough for their end to get it to the over. So I like the under here.
They'll play the winner. The winner of that game will play the winner of Loyola, Chicago, Nevada. And right now, Nevada anywhere from 1 to 1.5. It's come down a little bit. Again, Jason Sybil at CGT Sportsbooks told Dave and I on a radio show on Wednesday afternoon that all the sharp money so far in this particular game happens to be on the short underdog, Loyola, Chicago.
Sister Jean's loading up on Loyola.
Sister Jean, that's what it is. She's bringing in the money. Every time I see her, I get nervous. I think of those rulers going across the knuckles as a young Catholic chap, but which I know you were too, Marco.
I had a couple across the back of the head. Back then, we didn't hit anybody anywhere. And
Sister Mary crack your knuckles?
Yeah, and the old paddle with the holes in them?
Oh, yeah. The holes make it a lot worse, let me tell you.
Well, you guys are dating yourselves. I'm serious.
That's the oldest guy in the room.
Well, no, I mean, they don't do that stuff anymore. No, listen, I was born before rulers were even invented.
His last ruler was Nero.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Oh, nice. Very nicely done. By the way, one of the cool things in this game, apparently Musselman's little girl, who's like, I don't know, she's 7 or 8 years old. Yeah. She's going to interview Sister Jean. I saw that. How cool is that? That's good stuff.
Yeah, that is very good stuff. Listen, Nevada, by the way, has been outplayed at about 60. They played 85 minutes because they had a 5-minute overtime against Texas. 60 of those 85 minutes, they've been the wrong side by far, but they've been around when it's been important to be there, Marco. Dave, your thoughts?
Have they only led for like 4 minutes?
Basically,
I think that's what it is.
That's about it. I mean, they're down by 13 well into the second half against Texas, and of course, and I had Cincy, they're down by 22 with midway through the second of that game.
I had them against Texas, so I'm happy with that result. I didn't get involved in the Cincinnati game. I'm not a totals guy, but this game screams under to me. It really does. Look, Loyola is going to take the air out of the ball. They're methodical on offense. They play it very well. They actually have a very good zone offense, in fact. But it's not a breakneck pace by any means. And I think Nevada's going to be, I think Nevada would like to get up and down, but I don't think Loyola's going to let them. And to me, this game, I don't think this game's getting to 140, and the total's above that. And that's the thing. And again, I'm not a totals guy, but that kind of jumped out at me on this game.
I hate to have to use Virginia as a comparison because they bowed out in the opening round against a 16 seed, but mini Virginia is kind of Loyola Chicago on the offensive end in that they shoot very well. They shoot well. They've got they got 5 guys averaging, I think it is, between 10 and 13 a game. No superstar who's going to score 25 or 30. But it's not a first team to 80, even though they shoot well pace. It's a first team to 65 is where they'd like this game, Marco.
Yeah, you know what? People look at Loyola and they dismiss it because it's, the Missouri Valley Conference, and this is their first year moving over there. And the conference lost some of its luster, obviously, when Wichita State left. Creighton left, a few years ago, and then Wichita State leaves this year. But I'll tell you what, this Loyola team, if you look at the numbers, I know they played in a soft conference, but you can't argue with what they've done.
But they killed everybody in the conference.
They killed everybody in the conference. They are a number 3 team offensively, shooting 50.6 from the field. And defensively, they're 22nd in the country. This team can actually play some defense. you look at Nevada and the way they won those 2 games, you like to say a team that can put a team on a roll. But I tell you what, they had to battle back 2 games in a row, and especially the Cincinnati game. You got to wonder what's left in the emotional tank. It's a good thing for them that this is the next round and it's the first game of the 2, because if they had to come back and play 2 days later after the 22-point comeback, I don't know that they'd have anything left in the tank. I like this Loyola team. I'm not going to buck Sister Jean. It's a great. Whoever wins this game and moves on, it's going to be a good story. But I like Loyola. I think even though they've played so well all year, they're the Cinderella to me that's left in the tournament. And I know, they're only 11 seed, but still the name and everything and story with them. I like them here. I got them winning by 3 to 4 points. I'll take them.
Texas A&M and Michigan. The sharp dog, according to CG and Jason Simbel, is in this game, and that happens to be Texas A&M. It's moved. We've seen the point spread move from Michigan 3.5 to 2.5. Obviously, this could change before the game tips off as far as where the Sharps are, where the public is. But if the Sharps remain on A&M, I'll be going against them. I do not like A&M in this particular game, Marco.
Now, I agree with you, Scott. I'm on the Michigan side here, and we did videos at WagerTalk this week, and Ralph brought up, good point about this Texas A&M team, though. At the beginning of the season, this was, a top 25 team. They had some injuries at the beginning of the season. They didn't play well. They're healthy now, and they're playing their best basketball of the season at the right time. So if you look and compare some of those early season numbers to what they are now, you're not doing yourself justice. This is a different team. But I look at Michigan and everybody, and I think why the Dogs looking popular is because obviously, and my mic's going to go dead here in a second, is because Texas A&M just blew the doors off of the Tar Heels. He's reaching for the mute button.
See, everybody who's, again, if you're not watching on radio, Mark Seidel is a huge North Carolina fan, so be careful, Marco.
I know,
but
I got to tell it the way it is. But I think everybody saw that, and they're overreacting to how good of a game Texas A&M played. And, I'm going to throw the old horse racing analogy out. Scott, I know you got a horse racing background. This is a horse that threw their best race of the season. And did they do too much and, going to bounce here? And they're looking at Michigan, and Michigan's had 2 games that were lackluster. They got by Montana. They were never in doubt, but they never pulled away either. They got the double-digit win, the late cover, and I was on Montana. That was my Thursday when I had all my games decided by a bucket. And then you had, the Houston game, which they didn't deserve to win. But how many times have we seen a team make a run to the Final Four that somewhere along the line they had that one game that they stole? They didn't deserve to win, and they got there. I just think Michigan, I don't think they were in sync last week. I think the time off, because this was the hottest team in the Big Ten down the stretch, and then they rolled through the Big Ten tournament. I just don't think they were mentally prepared 2 weeks off. That break was more of a momentum breaker for them because they played that tournament a week earlier. I think you're going to see a different Michigan team here. I also think you're going to see a faster pace game this time than they played the first 2. I lean to Michigan, and I lean the over in this one as well.
All the Big Ten teams struggled a bit at the outset of their first games in the tournament. Purdue didn't have a brilliant first half in their game. Ohio State clearly didn't, and got in all kinds of trouble before they pulled that game out. And Michigan was stale in the Montana game. They did not play well. Had they played a better team in that first-round game, they'd be done for the season. Montana's out of the Big Sky, and they gave it a good shot, and but the Big Sky isn't a very good conference, and we saw why. They didn't get that much better in the second game. So you're right. They were. If you're only basing it on what you saw last weekend, and that's how a lot of bettors make their bets. It's the last. What's the last thing we saw? If you're basing it on that, you're probably looking at A&M here. I don't know where to go with this, because I do think this A&M team is really capable, and that they underachieved due to a variety of reasons in the regular season. And you touched on some of them. One is that they couldn't get their lineup on the floor. They just had a lot of injury problems and issues and stuff like that. But, boy, they looked good last weekend. But they look too good for me to back here. The problem is I'm not as enamored with Michigan as some other people. I'm not that crazy about the Big Ten.
I'm enamored with the coach of Michigan.
So am I. Yeah, and if it comes down to Beeline versus Gillespie, I'm going to give Beeline the nod. I don't know. On paper, I think it's a toss-up game. So with the line where it is, I can't play anything here.
You know, if you watch that game against Carolina, they finished -8 in the turnover department. They had 8 more turnovers than did North Carolina, but they slammed the door defensively. Yeah. This rebounding margin is sick. They out-rebounded Providence and North Carolina 87-57 in those 2 games combined. We were talking about this game, as you mentioned, on videos when we recorded, I think it was on Tuesday afternoon, and somebody on the set had talked about the one thing you get out of a Beeline coach team that maybe you didn't down the stretch out of the other teams is that they're going to work their butts off whether they win or not. And I don't think you're going to see a situation where A&M has the clear shot to the glass like they got against both Providence in the second half and against North Carolina. And part of that could have been North Carolina was just they knew they were done. They knew they were cooked, and that's what happens. Sometimes you're not quite as big on the glass when it comes to hustling. By the way, speaking of the Montana game, and I didn't know at the time and that you had that as a big play, but Las Vegas Superbook over the Westgate tweeted out the line on me to eat more crawfish, or retweeted. I was minus $1.45 to eat more crawfish than Montana was going to score points about halfway through that game. So, and by the way, I did on Thursday night. But that was kind of funny when I saw that, knowing that I was at eating crawfish that night.
Aren't you supposed to pronounce crawfish with like kind of a New Orleans Cajun tinge?
Crawfish? Oh, crawfish? I don't know, but I just say crawfish.
I always
so do you say microfish or microfish?
I always went that route, and this is, here we go with going back in time again. Right. But there was some New Orleans chef who used to be on Johnny Carson.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but he spoke that way, and he always said crawfish. And so it's like, okay, crawfish.
Gosh, I'm trying to think what his name was, and I know because I remember him, and it was good.
Yeah, that's the guy, yeah.
Talking about dating yourself, Dave. Johnny Carson.
Well, see, Dave and I aren't old enough.
Black and white version?
No,
he's thinking of Jack Parr. I was thinking of Jack. All right, guys. Florida State, Gonzaga. They get the winner of the matchup we just mentioned, A&M and Michigan. And right now, Gonzaga laid about 5.5 total. Around 154, and big money at CG Sportsbooks on Gonzaga, according to Jason Simbel. They have a high 5-figure money line play on Gonzaga as of Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, as we cut this particular show. I've been ripping Leonard Hamilton apart for a couple of years now when it comes to big games, but here he is with a team that's not as talented as last year's, but yet he's got a chance to get to the Elite Eight if they can steal one here, Dave.
I think they kind of have to steal one. Gonzaga's gotten over that hurdle of coming in after a really easy run in the West Coast Conference, and I think being stale because they just weren't facing good competition after January 1st, year after year after year. And they really didn't this year. But what they saw last year and how they put things together once the tournament started and played their best basketball this season, I think, is carried over. So Mark Few is an excellent coach, and he's learned to adjust. I like the way Gonzaga's playing in this tournament. I think they're looking real good, and the team's deep too. You get an NBA guy coming in off the bench.
Sure.
I think Few's going to devise a game plan that will work against the length and athleticism of Florida State, and I think he can outcoach Hamilton. It's really that simple for me. This is a game where I go with the coach that I trust a lot more.
Worth a bucket more than Hamilton, would you say, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I basically award 2 points to Gonzaga on the coaching here. Yep. If this is close, late, now that doesn't do much good as far as the spread's concerned because Gonzaga is the favorite. But if it's close, late, I think the Bulldogs find a way to get it done, and Florida State will find a way not to get it done because that's what Florida State has historically done. Hats off to Hamilton. I mean,
give him credit.
His team went out and played great basketball last weekend. And his player rotation, which sometimes is something we've talked about as not being one of his strengths, it was really good.
He made all the
last
right
week.
moves.
He did.
No doubt.
He did everything right. So maybe Hamilton's getting better as well. But I trust Gonzaga more. And I like the tournament experience, the big game experience in this team. A lot of these guys have been here before. They were here last year. I think Gonzaga pulls out this game. Not confident enough to lay the number, though.
I like Gonzaga here, and I know, Scott, you and I both were on them on Saturday for, big plays. And the reason I was on them Saturday is because coming off that first game against Greensboro, they had the lackluster, ended up, the final score was closer, than it was, but still they didn't put that team away. And they ended up only winning by 4 points. And I think, as you said, Dave, they just had such an easy run in the season, long stretch of that conference, and then they didn't face their normal minor nemesis in St. Mary's in the final. They had, BYU, and they blew them out.
That was ridiculous. Yeah.
So everything was so easy for them, and then they sat around for some extra days because that conference plays their tournament a little bit earlier, not as early as the Big Ten did, but it was a situation where I thought they would have a great game in the next one because I love that good team that has that kind of mini scare, gets the wake-up call. You get to be, more focused. The coach can ride you a little harder. And they did. They came out 13-0 to start that game on Saturday.
It was fun.
It was
the
fun.
First 13 points.
And they carried that lead basically to halftime. I think they were up 10 or 11 at the half. But when they came out of the halftime break, it was not the same team. And Ohio State made the run. And, guys, with like 5-6 minutes left, Ohio State actually grabbed the lead.
Yeah, right.
And most teams don't come back after they relinquish a lead like that. And that's why I really like this Gonzaga team, because they didn't lose their poise. The veterans on that team, they've been in the big games before. The pressure didn't get to them. They settled down, and not only did they regain the lead, but Scott, they kicked this. I know you were out to dinner that night, and we were, texting back and forth. It was
the greatest dinner ever until they gave up the lead.
And they kicked it back out to 10. Now, It ended up getting, a little dicey in the last 30 seconds there because it became, a march to the foul line. But they showed the poise, and I like that moving forward. On the flip side to Florida State, that was a big win for them. Obviously, any tournament game's a big win to get you to the Sweet 16. But that one was a little extra special for Florida State because if you remember last year, it was Xavier that knocked Florida State knocked them out of the tournament. And Florida State was the team that was getting all the fanfare coming into that one. And not only did they lose, they got
killed them.
They got run out of the building. So that was a very satisfying win. The good thing for them, like we talked about the Nevada game, I would really have loved this to be the 2 days later. 2 days later for Florida State to come off that. They've had a few days to refocus, but I still don't think that they've got the talent to stay with Gonzaga. And I think Gonzaga, like they did against Ohio State, gets out to that quick start, and I don't see Florida State coming back in this one. I like Gonzaga.
This is it. The Las Vegas Superbook, Westgate, they've got some props on both days of games and all the games, and they do stuff like, the largest lead of the game by either team. They've got, on that particular game we just talked about, Florida State Gonzaga, 15.5, minus 110 either way. I think you're getting one team there that has a chance to be up by 15 or more. Yeah. I don't think if Florida State wins this game, I don't think there's ever a 16, 18, 20-point lead by Florida State. You might see it the other way if all goes Gonzaga's way and Leonard Hamilton reverts back to last year's tournament calls. But was there any – there's like 4 props or 5 props in every single game. Was there any on Thursday's games, Marco, that you liked that you took a look at?
I had 2, and actually one of them was the Gonzaga to get the lead over 15 because this is a team, Florida State. If they get behind and it's not going well, I could just see this team folding the tent and Gonzaga running them out of the building. And we haven't seen a full 40 minutes from Gonzaga yet in the tournament, and we know what they're capable of. We saw what they did in the conference tournament here in Vegas. So I like that one. And the other one I looked at, and again, when you look at these props, it's going to be a continuation of your handicap. If you like the game, you're going to look at it. And because I like Loyola, I like Clayton Custer over 13 points. His season average is just a tick above that. And you look at what's going to happen, he'll be the guy that'll have the ball in his hand at the end of the game. So if I think they're going to be winning, they're going to go to the foul line. Nevada's going to send him to the foul line, and he'll be the guy with the ball in his hand. We can get some cheap points at the foul line at the end. I like him over 13 points.
What's give me this is dumb, but give me a predicted final score, and I'll explain why on Loyola Chicago, Nevada.
Loyola Chicago, I see them getting this one in the upper 60s. I'm looking for them like a 68 to 62 type.
So we all kind of looking at an underplay here. Does that tie in at all to, Caleb Martin's over under 17.5 for Nevada? Yeah. It's a lot of points on a 125, 130 point game if it does go that way. And they have more than just Caleb Martin who can score points. That's just kind of an interesting prop that jumped out at me. But nothing that really stands out at me as far as the props are concerned. Like I said, I think Gonzaga's got a chance to get over 15.5 as far as a largest lead. I don't think Florida State has to. So you're kind of limiting yourself to one side there. And in Michigan, they're largest lead is 13.5 on either one of those teams, over/under minus $1.10. And Wagner, by the way, who didn't have the greatest opening round game and was struggling a little bit, his over/under in points are 14, again, minus $1.10 either way. I thought he started to come around a little bit against Houston in the second half, although if Houston makes their 2 free throws at the end of the game,
how
we're
bad,
talking about the Cougars right now.
I forget which Davis it was because they have 2, but, man, I felt bad for that kid.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you just bricked those 2 so badly, and that's the way it goes. You got to go home.
They had that game, I'll tell you, they
had the game.
They had that game, and they also had against Cincy in the conference championship where they threw the ball away with 1.5 seconds to go. Or
Calvin
was.
Sampson did a fabulous job with that team.
Yeah, he did, absolutely.
But what are you going to do? The guy misses the free throws. Nothing you can do.
Let's take one quick timeout. When we come back, we'll have a best bet from one of the games on Thursday. And, of course, by the way, folks, be sure to listen to Friday's podcast also. It's also up right now at WagerTalk.com, and we'll have all of Friday's games there also. Best bets in a moment.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to Wager Talk, Thursday version of the Sweet 16. Time for best bets. Let's start with the man under the hat. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Cokin. What do you got for us, Dave? Your best bet for the podcast.
And as we're recording this, just won a 3% play on the Braves. And yes, I am posting exhibition baseball because I think there's an edge to be had.
And you've upped them a little bit on your ratings as we get closer to the regular season.
These are the first 2. I'd been playing just 2% on the games I put at Wager Talk, just 2%. Today I moved the 2 games up to 3%.
Nice.
Because I know the starting pitchers are going to go longer.
Sure.
So I've got more reliability, and they both won today. Easy winner with the Cubs. Chris Bryant going deep in that game, and the Braves get a 3-2 win. So 6% net gain for those who might have followed.
Can't beat that with a
stick.
Well,
and the thing is that I am now in baseball mode. I've got basketball plays up, but there are not going to be too many of them moving forward. But the 5% plays have been really good. Okay, and 5-0-1. In the tournament, the push was Xavier against Texas Southern, which should have been a 35-point win, and maybe that was the indicator that the Xavier team wasn't really focused. And
that's a game they got to win huge.
They just giving up a 17-0 run to that team was absolutely absurd, and they didn't play well in the second half either. Anyway, I've got a 5% play up. I've had it up all week. I jumped on it right away. That's available right now at Wager Talk. Best bet here. I've talked about this a couple of times. Loyola's been Porter Moser's been so good at dictating the tempo all year long for Loyola Chicago. He's up against a guy who's just as good as he is in terms of coaching, and Musselman. Eric Musselman's a fabulous coach, done a great job with this Wolfpack squad. But I don't think that Moser's going to get forced into an up and down the court game. Now, if Nevada jumps out early, that could change. But Nevada hasn't been jumping out early. They've been a horrible first-half team in the tournament. They've been a second-half team. So I think Loyola is going to be able to impose their will, if you will, as far as the tempo goes, and that should indicate an under to me. I think this game's in the mid-130s. That's considerably under the number right now, which is like 142.5, 143. So I'll go with that for the best bet, Loyola and Nevada under.
Good stuff. Marco, we cut some videos on Tuesday. We had a nice guest on that particular show. We had Ralph Michaels, of course, Kelly Stewart from Kelly in Vegas fame, Preston Johnson, Sports Cheetah. You and I were on there, and those are up, obviously, right now, right here on the site, WagerTalk.com. So you want to check those out as everybody chimed in a little bit for their Sweet 16 games, and also some in-game betting advice that was given on a couple of these games where it might be good to just wait until the games get going and see how the teams are playing. That's up right now. Also, I'm sure you're going to have, if you don't already, at least a couple of big dance games going on Thursday and Friday. What do you got for us, and what's your best bet?
Well, I'm gonna have a 5% on one of the 2 days. I haven't posted my stuff yet. I'm putting the cards together. The day that I don't have the 5%, I'm going to put an all access on the other day, so you'll get everything together for that day. And our 5%'s, knock on wood, not quite as good as Dave over there, but close, 4-1-1 for the month of March with the 5% play. So looking to keep that running and actually have one in play tonight. So it hasn't started yet, so can't update
tonight,
the record.
It is Wednesday night for those who are listening.
It is Wednesday night,
sure.
We're taping on Wednesday. But I'm going to look at this Texas A&M Michigan game, and I just think this total is too low in this game. And I think the total is being based upon what we saw out of Michigan in the first two games. And the Montana game was, two factors there. One, Michigan definitely had the signs of rust coming off the long layoff. And two, Montana didn't want to run with Michigan. They wanted to slow that game down. And
right.
You had a game where the final score was 61-47. Then they got into a dogfight with Houston. And when neither team gets separation, you're going to play deliberate. You're not going to have all that fouling at the end of the game that we've seen has pushed a couple of these games over the total because, when it's an elimination game, you want to extend the game as much as you can. I think Michigan's going to come out much more efficient offensively, and they're going to be playing a Texas A&M team that, plays at a faster pace than what they've played so far in the tournament, but we're getting an over-under based on what we saw with the last couple games. So I think there's a ton of value in this total of it being like 134.5. I'm taking this one over the total. I think both teams are going to be in the 70s in this game, sending it over the total easily, and that's my best bet for the show.
There's a couple of totals, and I'll get to mine, which is going to be a side on Thursday in just a moment. I want to mention real quick that 3-1 in the big dance itself with our 5% plays. The lone loser, unfortunately, was Cincinnati up 22 that lost that game outright to Nevada. That was how close we came to 4-0 in the big dance thus far with the big plays. And also, when I'm looking at what we've done going back, I'm going to mention a couple of things, first of all, because I don't want people to forget about the NBA.
Right.
And my executive plays in the NBA, 65% since December 16th. That's a long-term run. We're 65% for the season in college basketball, 5% plays. 3-1, as I mentioned, in the big dance with 5% plays. And we've got one up, like Dave, I've got one up that I put up early. I think I put it up on Tuesday afternoon, 5% play for the Sweet 16. And I'm not going to be shocked if I have another one. I'm kind of waiting to see how point spreads move on another game, but at least 5% going in the Sweet 16 as we look to get to 4-1. The podcast best bet for me is a side. It's going to be Michigan, laying the 2.5 for all those reasons that we mentioned a little bit earlier. I won't repeat it. You can go back and listen to it if you want. Slide that little bar over if you want to go back and listen to why we like Michigan. But I think it's a situation where they end up winning this game by about 6 or 7 points. And I do like the matchup. This is another one, by the way. Maybe I don't like the matchup on paper as much as Few over Leonard Hamilton, which certainly doesn't mean that their players don't come out and change the course of that game. But here, I like Beeline almost as much over Gillespie as I do Few over Hamilton, and I think his players are well coached enough that they're going to come through, again, win this game by 3 or 4 buckets by the time it's said and done. So I'll go with Michigan. Marco, you're on the over with the Michigan game, correct? And
Correct.
Dave, you're on the under on the Loyola Nevada game.
Correct.
Good stuff.
By
guys.
the way, between the three of us in the tournaments, 5% plays, 12 wins, 1 loss, 2 pushes. Or 12 wins, 2 losses. And 2 pushes. That's pretty good.
I think I'd take that anytime.
Yeah.
It might not be good enough for Seidel, but I'll take it. All right, guys, let's wrap it up here. Thursday's podcast. Be sure again to listen to Friday's podcast. We'll cover all 4 games from the Sweet 16. Some thoughts on maybe a couple of props we'll get from Marco if he has any. And, of course, best bets from Friday's card. We are Wager Talk.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.
I'll catch you on the flip side.